she's gonna go something like this.
Hey folks, Casey here and welcome back to the channel. This week, the F100 cab is firmly mounted to the Crown Vic chassis. The F100 cab has become one with the Crown Vic floor and firewall. Everything is metal finished and just about as perfect as I'm gonna ever get it. So if you'd like to see how that was done, stay tuned. So using the Crown Victoria floor presents an interesting challenge in that the rear of the cab area has these large lowered spots. So as before, we're starting with the paper template and just kind of pressing that into shape, tracing, using dirty fingers to leave an impression on the paper and cutting away slowly until everything fits. Once we're satisfied with the paper template, we can transfer that to metal, and then we have to mark for a bend. This is about a 30-degree bend, which puts the rest of our panel in alignment with the Crown Victoria floor. To make this bend, I'm using a Grizzly finger brake that I got on Facebook Marketplace for about $300. This is really an invaluable tool. I don't use it every day, but when I need it, you can't beat it. And now for a final test fit, because any adjustments that need to come before this next step, which is going to kind of lock the shape into place. Bead rolling. Bead rolling is one of those tasks that is not nearly as easy as it looks. I'm really trying hard to master it, and this video is sped up about 4 times. That's how glacially slow I'm going, because the first time I tried to bead roll a panel, these corners, they can really trip you up. You need to maintain constant movement throughout the corner, and that is tricky. So I'm going as slow as my machine will allow. I have learned 2 tricks that have really helped my progression in bead rolling. 1, count the number of turns that you tighten the rollers, because you have to have consistency there. 2, you cannot stop in the corners. You have to keep the machine moving throughout the entire corner radius. I guess I should talk about the bead roller itself. This is an extensively modified Harbor Freight bead roller. I know that Harbor Freight doesn't sell these anymore, but if you'd like to learn more about what I did to this bead roller, it is applicable to other models like those from Eastwood and Princess Auto in Canada. I'll put a link to those videos in the description. And well, I guess this is actually going to technically be 3 tips, because the third one is don't over roll your pattern. When you line up your stop, you stop, and that's it. Not too shabby for basically a novice. All right, folks, so right off the bat, I gotta apologize for the crappy audio. I usually film with all the fans off, despite the heat. It's just, I've been doing it too long, and I need a fan on, so you got a little hum in the background. My apologies for that. For this rear panel, I'm gonna be using a combination of rosette welds and some seam welding. Don't ask me why I chose to do it that way, but I did it that way on the other panel, and so I'm gonna keep that going with this panel. So this kind of has a sweet spot where it fits in pretty tight. I'm gonna get it in there and I'm gonna tack it. What that allows me to do is that allows me to get in here and really figure out which one of these rosettes is gonna be the flattest. And this is gonna be my huckleberry right here. There we go. Once I get a tack and a rosette, then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to tap this sucker down for each weld. That way I can really get in and get a good hot rosette weld. Like so.
So before I go too far with the rosette welds, I want to start to look at the fitment down here where the panel interacts with the floor. Oops. You see, I did not want to do that. I want it like this, right here. And now I'm going to throw a tack down at the bottom. There we go. So now that's kind of sufficient to where it's not going to really move on me. At this point, I'm feeling pretty good about how this is shaping up. And then from there, it's just a process of kind of working your way around the panel, filling everything in. I'll bring you back when it's fully welded. All right, and here everything is fully welded in. And there is the back of the cab all buttoned up. Now this is still gonna get seam sealer and some Wimbledon white paint to match the rest of the cab, but this is how I have chosen to do this part of the build. Now, I know I didn't cover any of the metal finishing. This isn't really metal finished, but we will cover that aspect in the next part, which is the steps. So as with a lot of projects that I try to cover on YouTube, I like to always build one and then decide how I'm gonna show it on video. So this is the steps round for the passenger side of the F100 cab. The first step of this process is to template out the piece of metal that we're gonna need to cut. I like to really take my time and try to make the thing as level as possible. So I overcut the poster board slightly. I went back and I added masking tape so that my template actually has a nice even relief across the top of the step frame. That way, when I weld it, I can metal finish that edge to make the whole thing look seamless.
Okay, so here we are transferring our template to a piece of sheet metal. I'm using 18 gauge sheet metal for all of the sheet metal work on this cab. This is the Eastwood Beverly shear. This thing has been absolutely indispensable in this project. It cost about $200, but there is no easier way to make straight, clean, burr-free cuts on sheet metal. I've cut up an entire sheet of metal with this thing so far, and let me just tell you, it works. Laying out the bead rolling pattern. I like to start by laying out the pattern on my template first, just to get an idea of what it's going to look like. But from there, we figure out where the flat part of the panel is going to be. Mark that out. Mark an inch in from the edges. That seems to give you a nice relief and still keep a straight edge on your panel. I put my design element in the center, and then I'm using actually the arbor for my die grinder to create the radius. You got to have a radius, otherwise you can't make the corner. One thing that I found is critical before you start rolling your pattern, you got to walk the panel through the bead roller to make sure that you can make the corners, that you have enough throat depth in the bead roller to roll out the whole pattern.
All right, so unfortunately the camera cut off in the middle of me rolling out this panel, but as you can see here, I haven't wiped the ink off of this yet. I'm getting a lot closer. What I have found to be really critical is when you're in these corners, you can't stop. I slow the machine down as slow as the machine will go, but you have to keep moving throughout the corner. And as you can see, I did a good job of keeping the edge of my die right on that black line all the way around. A little bit of stuttering right in the corners, but nobody's ever gonna look that close at these panels. I did make a little mistake over here. I started to lose the line, and you can kind of see what happens. You know, there's my line down there, right where the groove is. I'm in it, I'm on the line, and then I'm missing the line, and I missed it by about 1/8 of an inch. But what I found is it's really hard to correct in the middle of rolling a bead, so you have to just kind of commit. This sloughs off slightly, and my gap widens up slightly. Again, I don't think anybody's ever gonna see it. I was able to recover and do the rest of the panel just fine. This was my start and stop right here, and I just about nailed it. So overall, really happy with how that came out.
So again, here I am using the English wheel with a forming band to put the radius in the panel to the two areas where it meets the step. I'm working with two different radiuses. One radius is tighter than the other. I don't have a set of radius gauges. I know that would be extremely helpful because you match the radius that you want to bend to the wheel on your English wheel, and then there's no guesswork involved. I usually start with the lowest radius and work my way tighter gradually until I have the shape that I want. So we just finished the tight radius. Now we're switching to a flatter die and doing the larger radius for the rear of the step. And the forming die works. It does not stretch the metal. It just bends it as you run the panel back and forth in a single direction.
All right, and it'll go something kind of like this. As you can see, I don't quite have it perfect in here where it meets the transition, but you know, as I come in, I will tack it in and it'll take the shape. But it fits the step really nicely. So in hindsight, I should have done this a different way. I've got the Crown Vic floor and the F100 cab and the F100 step frame and this big gap, and you can kind of get a preview of what I did over there. I bent up a little piece of steel that basically slips up into place. So it slips into place over the top of the Crown Vic floor, and then you can pull it tight into this step and weld it all around. What this will allow me to do is this will allow me to shoot seam sealer between this little piece here and the Crown Vic floor. I'm also going to weld it in a couple places along the top to hold it in place. And then it will close off the whole step from the outside of the car. Now, my fancy piece would do that too, but then it would leave all of this interior metal exposed unless I cut it all away, but that'd be taking more structure out of the F100 cab. So basically, this is going to be a double wall step and fully tacked in. And there we are, fully welded up and ready for metal finishing. So I know I've skipped over some of the steps. I've shown you guys these steps in other videos, but we'll go ahead and go over metal finishing to try to make this look as seamless as possible. All right, so metal finishing the top edge of this step. Sure, I could leave these welds exposed. I mean, they don't look horrible. But you know, this is going to be where you interact with the truck cab getting in and out. You don't want to be catching the rubber of your shoe on these weld beads. And you can't start grinding on weld beads without grinding the whole thing, because then it just looks ridiculous. To have this edge have a nice bevel from the top of the step into the side is going to be a very pleasing look. So to do this, we start with our confines. We come in from the top and we basically grind the top of this weld seam level with the top of the step. And then we come in from the side, and this is a little bit harder because of the concave here, but we grind the side of this weld seam level with the side of the step. Okay, so as soon as you touch the base metal, you gotta stop, you gotta go to a different area. Now, I'm grinding right now with this edge of my roll lock, and it's spinning this way. On the opposite edge, it's spinning the opposite way. So if I touch down here and I touch down here, but I still have a high spot here, I come in and I spin from the other direction, and sometimes that'll help even out the gap. See that? So I'm touching here, I'm not touching there, and I'm touching here. So that's about as far as you want to take the top edge on your first pass with your highest grit. Let me do the whole thing. I'll bring you back and show you. All right, so here's where I'm going to stop on the first stage of grinding this top edge. And as you can see, I'm starting to touch the base metal or the parent metal in most of the edge, but I'm stopping because I still have other grits to work with. And I don't want to take it down in 36 grit and put big 36 grit scratches in the parent metal. So now I'm gonna concentrate on the front face. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna try to keep my grinder perpendicular to the surface and just go until I start to touch that nice new piece of sheet metal. The way I built this panel, the panel was laid in flat, and there was a little bit of a bevel at the top edge. So most of my weld has filled in that top bevel, and that's actually how you want it because you do less grinding here. Let me go ahead and finish this surface, and then I'll bring you in. I'll show you the next step after this. All right, so I'm far from an expert when it comes to this stuff, but a little bit of a tip that I have gleaned is you want to have the biggest grinding disc possible when you're working on these big flat areas, because a big flat disc helps you keep your grinder flat to the surface and not, you know, come in and start gouging at an angle or anything like that. But when you're in these contours, the smaller the disc, the better. So I have a 1-inch arbor, and when my discs, it'll like cut them down to smaller sizes to get the most life out of them, because really you mostly wear out the edge. So I'm gonna try the 1-inch disc in this corner here. All right, so here is where I'm stopping on the vertical surface. Now there's one more step before I switch to the next grit down. In the most controlled manner possible, I'm gonna take some long 45-degree bevel strokes against this whole surface. That's about all I'm gonna do in the 36 grit. But that just starts to give the edge its shape. Maybe one more. Now we're gonna go back over the whole thing again in 80 grit, starting at the top surface. One thing I can't overemphasize here is that a light touch is absolutely critical. You don't want to be pushing into this thing with your grinder. I am barely letting this thing skim along the surface. All right, so we've got our top surface done in 80 grit. We've got our vertical surface done in 80 grit. And now we're gonna start to bevel this joint at a 45-degree angle. All right, and now, basically we're gonna work our way down in angles. We've already done flat, so we're gonna go 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, and so on. This is starting to look pretty good with a die grinder. If I want to get real technical, what I would do next is I'd get in here in these little low spots. I'd throw some more tacks in them. I'd probably leave that. Maybe one right there. Right, and is it perfect? No. That's good enough for this truck, for sure. And like I said, I'm far from an expert when it comes to this stuff, but this is how I was taught. By the way, I've only done the top edge here. I could go to a similar level of effort on the sides and even the bottom seam if I wanted to, or I could do seam sealer or Bondo, or I'm probably just gonna paint it. All right, and here are the seats that I'm planning on running. These are the Kirky low back vintage racing buckets. I've just got them mocked up right now on some 2x4s and 2x6s just to kind of get the height right. But I'm looking out the center of the windshield with them at this height. I feel like I'm a little bit close to the back of the cab, a little bit of whiplash, and I'd be breaking the rear window with my head, which wouldn't be great. But I've also got the pedals in place to kind of start to get a feel for how this thing is gonna come together. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching this week. Be sure you smash that like button if you like what you saw in today's video. Make sure to leave a comment and join the conversation, because I reply to every single comment that I get. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, because that helps me keep the content coming to you week after week. What's next for the 1958 Ford F100 Crown Vic Swap project? Well, I would like to get the gas tank mounted back in this thing. I want to mount it a little bit lower than most folks typically do, because I don't like losing as much bed space as these swaps typically lose. I'm hoping I can gain an extra 3 or so inches of bed space compared to your average Crown Vic swap that you see on the internet. Getting the tank back in means that I can fire this thing up and hear what it sounds like with the new exhaust, and then probably figuring out the seats and the rest of the controls. Once I get the steering column in this thing, I can drive it. Anyway, I truthfully don't think you guys are that far off from hearing this thing make some noise. although I do start school again tomorrow. Literally tomorrow. When you see the video go live Friday morning, it'll actually be the start of my second day back. So progress might be a little bit slower, but it's still gonna be coming, so stay tuned. All right, folks, that's all for this week. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next one.